Welcome to the Deep Dive. We've just finished pouring through, well, an enormous stack of source material on the future of U.S. education policy. And what we found is really a high-stakes standoff brewing.
Yeah, it seems that way.
On one side, you've got these dramatic proposed federal changes, Project 2025 we're talking about.
Right.
And on the other, a very meticulously planned two-pronged strategy. It's designed not just to defend against the changes, but actually to proactively redefine success in education.
It's really vital, I think, to grasp the scale here, what's at stake.
Okay.
The sources show these policy proposals. They aren't just, bureaucratic shuffling. They're aiming at roughly $80 billion in existing federal funding.
Wow, $80 billion.
And potentially impacting over $1 trillion in combined state funding for K-12 and higher ed.
$1 trillion, okay.
So we're talking about decisions that could radically restructure the whole educational landscape for millions. Students, teachers, communities, everyone.
All right, let's really unpack this, Ben. Our mission today, it's sort of twofold. First, we need to understand the core threats outlined in those Project 2025 policies. That's the defensive challenge.
Right, the pushback.
And then we're going to spend a good chunk of time exploring the NAACP's alternative vision. It centers on this proactive, data-driven campaign to actually find and replicate educational success.
It really is a classic defensive and offensive strategy, isn't it? But playing out in the policy arena.
Exactly. So let's start with that defensive battle line. The direct opposition to key Project 2025 education policies.
Okay.
The source material breaks down 5 major proposals, and they all seem to push education towards, well, decentralization and privatization.
The first one is pretty radical. It's the complete elimination of the Federal Department of Education itself.
It's gone.
Gone. The idea is to shift all responsibilities, all oversight, entirely to states and local governments, basically eliminating the national policy body.
Okay, wow. And the second point, it hits funding that's, well, critical for the highest need students. We're talking about phasing out Title A funding.
Yeah, and Title I is massive. It's the largest federal K-12 program. It's basically a lifeline for millions of America's highest need schools, those with lots of low-income students.
Right.
The analysis we looked at suggests phasing that out could directly lead to job losses for well over 180,000 teaching positions nationally.
180,000 teaching jobs. That really puts a number on it.
And it would adversely affect something like 25 million children annually who rely on those resources.
Okay. And moving down the age bracket, Project 2025 also proposes eliminating the Office of Head Start,
which impacts critical early childhood education. It currently serves about 833,000 low-income children every year.
So if you remove the Department of Ed, Title I, and Head Start,
you're basically dismantling the main ways the federal government tries to enforce some minimum standard of equity across the states.
Okay. The fourth major policy mentioned is a strong push for school choice and vouchers.
Right, diverting public tax dollars to private and sometimes religious schools.
And the sources note this isn't exactly a new idea, is it?
No, not at all. It traces back to economist Milton Friedman way back in 1955.
And finally, point 5 looks at higher education, a massive restructuring of student loan programs.
Yes. This includes ending parent PLUS loans, which many families rely on, and significantly, completely eliminating the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, PSLF.
Oh, PSLF. That's vital for people in lower-paying public service jobs, right? Teachers, social workers.
Exactly. People in nonprofit roles, too. It's a huge incentive for those careers.
So if we step back and look at the potential implications here based on the analysis, it sounds like the main concern driving the NAACP's defensive strategy isn't just about the money itself.
No, not just the money.
It's about the potential widening of already existing equity gaps.
Precisely. If Title I and Head Start are phased out, the disparities in resources and outcomes, they would likely widen disproportionately, hitting low-income and minority students the hardest.
And what about oversight? Civil rights?
Well, losing that strong federal oversight means the Office for Civil Rights, the OCR, it would be potentially weakened significantly.
Which risks? What? Inconsistent enforcement.
Exactly. Inconsistent enforcement of crucial anti-discrimination laws.
Yeah.
Everything from Title IX protections against sex discrimination to the vital protections for students with disabilities under IDEA.
So if the federal government steps back from setting and enforcing those national minimum standards, what does that fragmentation actually look like on the ground?
You could see extreme policy swings from state to state. Imagine states with weaker commitments to education funding or equity.
Right.
You'd likely see immediate inconsistencies in curriculum standards, teacher qualifications, even graduation requirements.
That creates a huge challenge for families that move for student mobility.
An enormous challenge, yeah.
And thinking about that push for privatization, the voucher system, the analysts we reviewed drew a really compelling, maybe even a bit dark analogy.
The comparison to the privatization of the prison industrial complex.
Exactly. Can you unpack that comparison a bit?
Well, the argument presented in the source material is essentially this. Market-driven models haven't exactly yielded positive or, broadly successful outcomes when applied to other fundamental social goods.
Like prisons.
Like prisons, yeah. The key concern boils down to accountability. If you introduce a primary profit motive into something like education, the goal of maximizing shareholder returns, well, it can easily override the goal of ensuring equitable access and high-quality academic outcomes for all students.
It suggests a pretty profound philosophical conflict, doesn't it? When profit comes first.
Accountability and equity can often fall second, yes.
And is this critique just ideological, or is there more to it?
Well, the sources frame it as historical, actually, based on documented outcomes where some privatized systems, not just in prisons, but other areas, have sometimes led to issues like corruption, a lack of transparency.
Avoiding the kind of public oversight that traditional public schools, for all their flaws, are still subject to.
Right. Accountable to taxpayers, to the community.
That makes the shift in strategy we mentioned earlier even more compelling then. The sources indicate the NAACP chose not just to fight defensively, but to actively build something alternative, define success on their own terms.
This is that strategic pivot we talked about. The approval of this major positive campaign in late 2024, maybe early 2025.
The best academic practice models for Black students campaign.
Exactly. And its core goal is, well, simple but really powerful. It's about pivoting the whole narrative, moving away from just focusing on deficits and problems.
Towards possibilities and solutions.
Precisely. By identifying where Black students are already achieving academically at high levels, it's about building blueprints for success, not just constantly fighting fires.
That sounds incredibly methodical. It's not just wishful thinking, is it? It seems very data-driven, almost a grassroots operation.
It is, very much so.
Can you walk us through how they actually find these bright spots, these successful schools?
Sure. It starts with a pretty comprehensive 4-stage action plan, and it's executed by grassroots volunteers. The campaign apparently calls them data detectives internally. Data
detectives, I like that. Okay, stage 1.
Stage 1 is finding what works. Using public records requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, state-level requests to identify schools that meet a very specific high standard.
Okay, what is that standard? How high is the bar?
It's based on 2 critical measurable criteria. First, at least 50% of the school's Black students must be proficient on state assessments, reading, math, the core subjects.
50% proficiency.
Yep.
And the second criterion?
The second one is that the school as a whole must achieve a collective 2.0 GPA or higher among its Black students.
A 2.0 GPA, meaning no D or F grades on average.
Essentially, yes. It signifies that students aren't just passing a single test, but are succeeding across their coursework.
That 2.0 rule seems quite restrictive. Did the sources explain the thinking behind using GPA alongside test scores?
They did. And it's about looking at comprehensive success, beyond just that one snapshot of the annual state test.
Right. Tests can be taught to, or scores can fluctuate.
Exactly. Test scores can sometimes be gamed or might reflect a specific intervention just for the test.
Yeah.
But a 2.0 GPA minimum suggests students are consistently passing core classes, succeeding day to day.
It implies they're more likely on track for graduation for post-secondary options?
Right. It acts as an accountability measure for sustained local success within the school environment itself.
Okay, so the data detectives find these schools meeting both criteria. What happens next?
That moves them into stage 2, which the source material refers to as documenting the magic.
Documenting the magic, okay.
This means creating detailed, qualitative case studies, really digging into why these schools are successful, identifying the specific strategies they're using in practice.
Like what kind of strategies?
Things like culturally relevant curriculum, effective teacher training programs, strong principal leadership, robust social-emotional learning supports SEL deep parent and community involvement. So the how. Not just the what.
Precisely the how. These findings are then packaged into a practical, sort of plug-and-play toolkit.
A toolkit? For whom?
For parents. Local NAACP leaders, school board members, community advocates, anyone who wants to replicate these successful strategies in their own communities, in their own schools.
And then stage 3 is about sharing this information,
Yeah.
building the infrastructure.
Exactly. Stage 3 involves building a centralized resource hub on NAACP websites. This hub will host these validated case studies, the practical toolkits, guides, maybe even video examples.
Making it accessible.
Making it accessible and actionable. And the final stage, stage 4, is advocating for change.
Okay, how does that work?
This is where they leverage this documented empirical success. They use the data, the case studies, the toolkits.
To argue for systemic reform.
Yes. And to advocate for the necessary resource allocation in underperforming schools, showing proof that success is possible under the right conditions.
What's really remarkable here, and the source material highlights this powerfully,
is that the strategies that help Black students succeed, things like high expectations, adequate and equitable funding, a supportive school climate, great teachers, community involvement.
they're often the same strategies that help all students succeed. It's not some separate, secret formula.
It creates a kind of universal advocacy tool then.
Absolutely. By identifying and documenting excellence for a historically marginalized group, they are, in effect, providing a clear, evidence-based roadmap for improving educational outcomes for every single child, really, in every neighborhood.
It turns specific achievement data into a powerful argument for broad systemic reform.
That seems to be the strategic intent, yes.
Okay, we need to pull back for a moment now and look at the deeper context here. The historical and ethical foundations mentioned in the sources.
Right.
Because this campaign, according to the analysts, isn't just rooted in modern data. It's actually anchored in ancient moral philosophy.
Yes, and this is where it gets truly fascinating, I think. The decision to explicitly connect this modern struggle for educational equity and balance directly to the ancient African moral order of Ma'at.
Ma'at, from ancient Kemet or Egypt.
Right. It's presented not just as history, but as a living moral framework for taking action today.
And Ma'at, for listeners who might not be familiar, it embodies these core principles, I think 7 of them: truth, justice, balance.
Harmony, order, reciprocity, and propriety, yes. These guiding virtues for a just and ordered society.
And the sources explicitly frame the current policy fight using this ancient lens.
They do. The policies promoted by Project 2025, particularly those seen as suppressing historical accuracy, promoting inequity, or creating disorder through drastic cuts, are philosophically framed as promoting Isfet.
Isfet, the ancient concept of chaos, injustice, imbalance.
Exactly, the direct antithesis of Ma'at.
So Ma'at is positioned as this moral framework for social resistance, a resistance rooted in truth, in cosmic justice, standing against that perceived chaos.
That's the framing presented. It's quite a profound philosophical anchor for a modern policy document and campaign.
Does it go deeper than just the overall framework?
It does. The idea extends into actual instructional practice through the wisdom of figures like Ptah Hotep.
The ancient vizier from the Old Kingdom.
Yeah.
Known for his teachings.
Yes. The sources suggest Ptah Hotep translated Ma'at into principles for human behavior and leadership, emphasizing things like humility, integrity, fairness, speaking truth to power.
Values that should guide teachers, administrators, leaders today.
That's the argument. And the modern strategy explicitly tries to connect this ancient Kemetic philosophy to the U.S. Constitution's own ideals of fairness and justice.
Kind of showcasing the deep, ancient African roots of these modern democratic ideals we often take for granted.
Precisely. It reframes the narrative historically and ethically.
Alongside this philosophical grounding, there's also a crucial legal anchor, isn't there?
Yes, the legal framework is equally important.
The campaign advocates using its findings these documented best academic models
As the basis, the legal framework for demanding systemic improvement elsewhere.
And critically, it includes a specific request for a formal legal opinion regarding the modern educational implications of Brown v. Board of Education.
Yes, requesting that specific legal opinion is a very powerful strategic move.
Why is that so significant?
Because it aims to provide a formal legal foundation for local NAACP units, for parents, for advocates, to push for the replication of these proven high-performing models.
Making it a legal imperative, potentially.
Potentially, yes. The argument could be made that states failing to provide the conditions necessary for success, conditions demonstrably achieved elsewhere for marginalized students, might actually be violating the spirit, if not the letter, of Brown v. Board, the promise of equal educational opportunity.
So when we synthesize these two massive agendas, You have the defensive fight against eliminating federal resources and oversight, coupled with this proactive, data-driven campaign to identify and spread best practices, all rooted in these deep historical and moral principles. What does this combination really mean for the future of education reform?
It means the NAACP's overall strategy, as presented in these sources, is incredibly sophisticated. It's multi-level.
Top-down and bottom-up.
Exactly. It combines top-down legal challenges and national policy advocacy fighting against proposals like eliminating the Department of Education with simultaneous bottom-up grassroots mobilization.
The data detectives, the toolkits, the community organizing.
Right, plus public awareness campaigns and the active promotion of these concrete, proven academic practices. They're working to both safeguard existing equity measures and aggressively advance educational excellence simultaneously.
So this deep dive has really shown us two major forces colliding, hasn't it?
Yeah.
On one hand, this push for radical decentralization, privatization, maybe even dismantling federal involvement.
And on the other hand, a highly organized campaign demanding evidence-based systemic reform anchored in these powerful principles of justice, balance, and historical truth.
It feels like that collision point really holds the key to the future direction of American education.
It really does. And the source material leaves us with a provocative thought. Building on that messy connection,
Right.
it suggests actually embedding math-centered ethics within K-12 instruction itself to cultivate a new generation of leaders grounded in humility, integrity, justice, balance.
Wow. So the final question they seem to be posing is,
Can drawing inspiration from a moral code that's, 6,000 years old, can that truly provide the necessary ethical foundation for modern American education reform?
and in doing so, perhaps reveal the ancient, even African roots of our most cherished modern ideals of fairness and balance?
That's the profound question left hanging.
That is certainly an incredible question for you, our listeners, to consider. Think about how those principles, truth, balance, justice, accountability, how might they be applied to the standards, the resource allocation, the overall climate in your own community schools? Thank you for joining us for this deep dive.